Hi, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for this Facebook Live town hall meeting. It's an important time for us to be getting together and to be hearing directly from people across New Hampshire about the issues that concern you, the challenges that we face as a state and as a country, and how we can work on solutions that are going to move us forward and make people's lives better. So, we've been hearing from literally thousands of Granite Staters on a weekly basis who have reached out to our office and are expressing profound concerns about steps they see being taken by the new administration, cuts that are being made to vital programs, individuals that are being laid off from critical positions within the federal government, and obviously legislation that could potentially cut Medicaid by hundreds of billions of dollars and impact the care that's delivered right here in the Granite State. We also see news about across the board tariffs being put in place in a very unstable situation that's been created with respect to our economy. So I hear these concerns. We are working every day to try to take action and to make sure that we're putting the needs of Granite Staters first and are standing up and being counted wherever possible. So I want to let you know that we're pushing back against the administration and urging them to work with Congress on a bipartisan basis when it comes to funding our government and meeting the needs of our nation. Now we're up against an important deadline in just a couple days where government funding will expire. And I think we need to be working on a bipartisan basis to solve this problem. What happened this past week, the House took up a partisan bill that Republicans presented that would extend government funding until the end of the fiscal year without the customary negotiations that always happen on Capitol Hill between Republicans and Democrats to reach a consensus. After they passed their partisan bill, the Speaker adjourned the House and told us to leave town. What has happened next is the Senate is considering this legislation, but has few options with respect to how to prevent a government shutdown. What needs to happen here is a temporary extension, as we did back in December, as we have done on so many occasions, to continue government funding to ensure that it will continue to meet the needs of people while the bipartisan negotiations happen. And there is still time for that to occur. I call on the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the Senate to work across the aisle and help deliver that commitment to the American people. But look, despite our charged political environment, I think there are opportunities to get some things done and to move our country forward. And I'm always looking for those opportunities to do what's right. I think a lot of the rhetoric in the last election was around how we can drive down the cost of living and make things make things easier and less expensive for families here in New Hampshire. And I'm looking for common ground with respect to how we continue our work to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to invest in affordable housing, to make sure that childcare is available to families in the Granite State. And I'll continue to seek out those opportunities to work with colleagues on a bipartisan basis. We're about 2 months into the new term, looking forward to a lot of activity on the committees that I serve on, including the Veterans Affairs Committee and the Transportation Committee. I'm the ranking member on the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee on the VA Committee, where we're focused on what we can do to expand and improve benefits for veterans, educational opportunities, workforce opportunities for veterans. And much of that work is done on a completely nonpartisan basis, as it should be for the heroes that wore the uniform of our great country. On the Transportation Committee, we've had a number of hearings already and are deep in discussions about how to build on the success of the bipartisan infrastructure law and continue the commitment that we need to make to our transportation systems and to meet the needs of our communities in terms of our built infrastructure. So whether that's water, broadband, roads and bridges, we need to make sure that the federal government is stepping up to the plate and providing our states and communities with the support they need to modernize our infrastructure, to meet the needs of our citizens and certainly of our economy too. Right now we're hearing from a record number of folks who are reaching out to our office as they're watching the news of executive orders and deeply concerning actions by this administration on a week-to-week basis. Many of you have mentioned Elon Musk specifically and his role in this administration. And I agree, I'm deeply concerned with an unaccountable individual who also happens to be the richest man in the world, who is calling the shots within the federal government without any transparency or without Congress playing their traditional role as a co-equal branch of government. And so I just can't see how someone who wants to move quickly and break things has been put in charge of making the government more efficient. The fact is, there's a way to do that, and I think you can do that through a process that puts good ideas on the table, certainly that looks to change the way things are and upend the status quo. But just the level of disruption and destruction we are seeing does not help our country deliver services, become more efficient, and achieve greater value for taxpayers' investment. So I think there are a lot of ways that we can work on these issues together. But I think it's an important time for people to be heard. And so I'd like to just be able to get to your questions here today. And I want to just say that your feedback and your input has been really important to me during my 6 years in Congress. I think this is an important time for American citizens to be heard. We are not powerless as American citizens to address concerns that we see in our country and in our communities. And so being an active participant in our democracy is an important way to do that. So let's get to some questions now, because I'm sure you'd love to hear what's on the minds of constituents like you here in the 1st District of New Hampshire. I'll start with one that we received online. It's from Paul in Barnstead. And he writes, I'm a 75-year-old disabled Vietnam veteran. I get all my care at the Manchester VA. I see that doctors are worried about what may happen. What can be done to help the doctors, nurses, and the veterans that depend on these benefits? And so, Paul, I want to thank you for your service to our country, for what your generation did during the Vietnam era. And I think that's a commitment that must be ironclad in terms of the services and care that we provide veterans in our country. Things have been moving in the right direction at the Manchester VA. We've seen greater investments in mental health care. There's a new women's clinic that's under construction there. We've seen the hiring of additional providers, but that progress could be disrupted by the firings that we're seeing within the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's estimated, based on a memo that was made public, that 80,000 positions could be at risk, which is more than 20% of VA's workforce. Now, you can't cut VA to that level without it having a direct impact on the delivery of care or on the ability of veterans to access their benefits. And so whether that is the 25,000 nurses that have been hired by VA over the last few years, mental health clinicians, thousands that have been hired in recent years, we've made progress to expand care to more veterans. Of course, we passed the PACT Act, which allows veterans who have been exposed to toxic substances to file claims and get benefits and seek care. All those are steps in the right direction, but we're not going to be able to continue to make progress if we don't have the experts who are able to see our veterans, the specialists, or even the people that are answering the phone and processing your claims. So I'm working with members of the Veterans Affairs Committee to defend the folks that serve our veterans, to make sure that we have adequate numbers in the right places and that 80,000 number doesn't come to fruition. I've been a little bit frustrated because as we ask questions in committee, the Department of Veterans Affairs is not offering us the information that we are asking for. Just this past week, I asked questions of a senior official at the Department of Veterans Affairs about a specific program and how many people were working in that program and how many people had been laid off. He couldn't provide that very basic information. And I don't think that was because he didn't know it. I think that's a tactic where they're stonewalling Congress, preventing us from being able to do our oversight role. Was able to work with my Republican counterpart on our subcommittee on that issue, on pushing back. We're going to continue to try to make sure we're understanding what's happening at VA and ultimately ensuring that we don't take any steps backward for our veterans. So let's head on to the next question. We've got Wendy from Goffstown who says, as a 34 plus year postal worker, I'm very concerned that the administration is trying to privatize the delivering of mail and packages, which will leave many residences without delivery or incurring a great expense to get delivery. So Wendy, thanks very much for your work for all of us. I think we all know that we rely on the Postal Service, whether you're just getting mail or medications at home, or you're a small business that receives information or gets your product to market to reach new customers. The Postal Service has been there for us throughout the history of this country. We've got to make sure that we defend it against cuts that would result in cuts to service, an elimination of, say, Saturday delivery, or any efforts that would undermine the integrity of the Postal Service. There have been proposals floated in recent years to privatize the Postal Service, to make it a for-profit entity. This, I think, is a government service that is wildly popular. We hear about it all the time. And we're taking action on this. I've worked with colleagues with respect to concerning news I heard about mail sorting at the Manchester facility. And we've introduced legislation and have been pushing to try to protect that sorting, because we know that's really important in terms of delivery times here in New Hampshire. We'll be introducing more legislation on that this week. And I think with respect to the Postal Service, there actually is strong bipartisan support in Congress. We recently passed important legislation that helps make the service more solvent and helps protect it and defend it from privatization. So that's an important step forward. But we've got to make sure that Congress's intent is honored and that the administration isn't going over our heads in dismantling the Postal Service. That would be dangerous for our country, certainly bad for the economy too. So we've got a question from Facebook now coming in from Jay. He says, what have you seen that shows you that the GOP is willing to work across the aisle? Well, Jay, I think that, as someone who's served in New Hampshire at a variety of different levels in public service, there are ways that we can relate to one another here and figure out how to move the ball forward. Oftentimes in Washington, that just seems so much more tortured than it needs to be. I mean, just look at the government funding debate right now and how it's clear what we need to do in terms of good governance for the country, but politics gets in the way. I will say there are some areas, and I mentioned some of my committee work, where we are able to come together and see eye to eye. I think the veteran space is a prime example of that. And I think some recent legislation dealing with issues like infrastructure, investing in chips in American manufacturing, which is really important for our economy and our national security. That's been an issue taken on a bipartisan basis. And so I think we should always look to seek that consensus wherever possible. Doesn't mean we're going to see eye to eye on all the issues. And it doesn't mean that when it comes to the big fights in terms of defending access to health care, making sure that we're not seeing a gutting of critical programs that serve Granite Staters while we're giving away tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. There are going to be very vehement disagreements about some of those policies, but I think there will be some good common ground with respect to issues that I mentioned around veterans, around transportation, around what we can do to get this economy moving in the right direction. We should be putting all the good ideas on the table and seeing what will work right now. And so I appreciate that question. I'll go to the next one. It's from Judith from Manchester, who wrote into us, and she says, what are you going to do to protect Social Security? It's our money. Our private information is also at risk. Judith, thanks for the question. And Social Security is a critically important program. And obviously, this is a program that is an earned benefit. People have paid into it through their working years, and they need to know that they can count on Social Security being there. Now, we've got just a few years left before the trust fund hits its limits and will not be able to pay out benefits. And so we do need a long-term solution with respect to how we protect those benefits, make sure that everyone pays their fair share, and ensures that this program is going to be there for generations to come. This is part of the American bargain, after all. Now, there have been some steps lately that are concerning around Social Security. We saw an announcement that with respect to the layoffs that we've seen within the federal government, that nearly half of the workforce at the Social Security Administration could be laid off, which would really disrupt the customer service that's provided through Social Security. If you have a question about your benefits, if you're enrolling, if you need to seek more information, those folks are really knowledgeable people who are experts in the Social Security program and assist people on a day-to-day basis. I'll also say that our office is happy to connect anyone if they have an issue with Social Security with the right folks over there at the administration. They do a great job. So we're working to defend the customer service aspect of Social Security, while we also think about how we ensure the integrity of the program. I think that the suggestion from Elon Musk that somehow this is an entitlement program that is a Ponzi scheme, I believe he called it, is just wrong. I think this is an earned benefit. It's a program we have to make sure that is there for future generations. I'm going to stand tall against any cuts that would jeopardize this program. Next question I have is from Raymond from Greenland. And he says, like many of your constituents, I support the reduction of government waste. What are your efforts to support these efforts? Seems like all the party is doing is being an obstacle on everything. Raymond, thanks for the question. I got into public service from my small business experience, and I know that at the end of the day, you can look out for people, serve your customers, and watch the bottom line. And I think government needs to operate by those very basic principles. So I do believe that there is a lot we can do with respect to waste, fraud, and abuse. One thing I would recommend is keep the individuals on the beat who are our inspectors general, that are seasoned individuals that do regular audits and deep dives on programs and help Congress find the kind of real savings that does make a difference at the end of the day. So I think we need those expert eyes on the dollars, on the programs. I've also introduced legislation that builds on their recommendations. The Ending Presidential Waste Act that I've introduced on a bipartisan basis, which will help identify waste when budgets are introduced, and put in place recommendations that come to Congress from the inspectors general and from reports that are issued. But there's so much that we need to do with respect to reducing the deficit. We know that the national debt has grown to well over $30 trillion. This is unsustainable for us as a country. It's going to shortchange our ability to take care of people and invest in the future of this country and make sure that we're giving taxpayers a break. And so as we advance conversations around debt and deficit and budget and taxes, we've got to make sure that the wealthiest Americans are indeed paying their fair share. While we do have an important look under the hood at programs where we can achieve savings. I will note over the last year or so, we have had basically level federal funding for government programs, which was part of a bipartisan deal that was negotiated in the last Congress. But this is an urgent issue, and I'm part of a bipartisan group through the Problem Solvers Caucus that's working on these issues. And I do believe that we need to recreate a commission that will put all the ideas on the table that can help us identify where those savings can be made. So there's a way to do it. I think it's by engaging the experts, engaging auditors, being responsible with taxpayer money, but just allowing an unaccountable individual within the executive branch to run roughshod over the federal government isn't the way that you smartly and carefully identify the savings that are absolutely warranted. So let's move on to the next question. From Facebook, Martin says, what about the NOAA cuts? Martin, thanks very much for that question. NOAA is really an important agency for New Hampshire in a number of different ways. When you think about our coastline, there are a variety of programs that serve New Hampshire. Obviously, we have our research institution at the University of New Hampshire. We have an important weather station on the top of Mount Washington, and of course our great coastline. NOAA is an important agency for New Hampshire, and I do worry about cuts and the ability of that research and that program to continue to move forward. So the opportunity there is to get a spending agreement, a bipartisan one through Congress, that can not just set spending levels, but make sure there are some guardrails to protect these programs. And as I think about the action that's being taken within the executive branch, I think this is a moment where we have to make sure that people are understanding the value of these investments. And so whether it's what I mentioned before, the Social Security Administration, the customer service, whether it's programs that help us plan for extreme weather events, or give us the information we need on our on a day-to-day basis, or protect our coastline. Those sorts of programs through NOAA are incredibly valuable, and something that I think we want to continue to be able to demonstrate here. So those sort of local stories, local impacts are really important in this conversation. And I think there's a lot, frankly, that members of Congress can learn about NOAA and other agencies. So we'll move on to the next one. Amber has a question, and she writes, what does the future for LGBT families with children look like? Amber, thanks very much for the question. I appreciate you writing in. I just think it's an important moment to remember that we're a country that does best when everyone can be themselves and when everyone is included in the destiny of America. And over a long period of time, this nation has come closer to its founding promise that everyone's going to be treated equally before the law, that we're all guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so that goes for families that might look a little bit different than others. And so regardless of who you are or whom you love, I think you should be treated equally before the law, be accepted in our communities. And I think it's always an important moment to recognize that hate should have no home in New Hampshire or any other state. We are the live free or die state. People respect the differences of our neighbors. And I think we are all better off when everyone can reach their full potential, become a full functioning member of our society and economy. That's been part of the secret of America that's allowed us to become the greatest economy on earth, the most innovative nation, the strongest nation on earth. We're the country that everyone is clamoring to come to. And that's because we're a nation that prides itself on freedom, that's diverse, and that goes for LGBT families too. So as someone who co-chairs the Equality Caucus, I'm really focused on what we can do to make sure that there's representation in Congress and that people feel safe and protected. And I think that goes for every American, regardless of who you are, what your family looks like. And certainly when it comes to young people in this country, they need to know that they have a future, that there's a place for them. And that's what I remind young LGBTQ individuals whenever I have an opportunity to speak with them. Thanks very much for that question. Next, we'll go to Facebook, and Kim Murdoch has a question. She says, Medicaid is a lifeline for over 187,000 Granite Staters. What can your constituents do to help protect Medicaid? Kim, thanks for the question. And this has been such an important topic as I've crisscrossed the district over the last few weeks. I've met with mental health providers in Carroll County. I've talked with community health center leaders in the Manchester area who have talked about the value of Medicaid. We know that, as you say, it serves tens of thousands of families in our state. And beyond that is just incredibly critical to the stability of our overall healthcare system. Our hospitals are under great financial strain right now. Our community health centers rely on the bill being paid from Medicaid. We know that to reach people with addiction and mental health services, that Medicaid, and particularly the bipartisan Medicaid expansion that was implemented in New Hampshire about 10 years ago, has been a game changer to get more people the help that they need. So this is about an investment in people who are working hard, who deserve the same access to care as anyone else. But unfortunately, Medicaid is a program that is on the chopping block. There was a recent bill that was passed by the House of Representatives that instructs the committee that oversees Medicaid to find $880 billion worth of cuts annually to the program. Now, you couldn't do that to Medicaid without pulling the rug out from under tens of thousands of Granite Staters who would lose coverage. You couldn't make drastic changes to the program without the funding being changed in a way that would cancel Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire outright. That would not just be bad for health outcomes and individuals' access to care, particularly in rural and underserved communities, but it would really be disastrous for the entire healthcare system in New Hampshire and across the country. So this is an opportunity for us to be hearing from healthcare providers, from patients, from Medicare and Medicaid recipients as these cuts are considered. And we're going to continue to take the stories of Granite Staters and that we're hearing on this issue with us to Washington to help push back against these disastrous proposals that are in the wrong place. And they're doing it all to make sure that they can fund tax cuts for the richest Americans. And I think those priorities are incredibly backward. We should be cutting taxes for hardworking families right now, middle-class families, expanding the child tax credit, but protecting healthcare coverage, making sure that's within reach. That is just really basic. It's the human thing to do. It's the economic thing to do. We're going to do all we can to stand up for Medicaid. Another question coming in, Joanne Miller from Hampstead asks, what are some of the actions we voters can do to ensure that the benefits we paid into are not eliminated? What help do you need from your constituents? Joanne, thanks for the question. And let me tell you, I am hearing from you loudly and clearly, but please keep it up. We measure all communications that come into our office. We try to get back to you within a very respectable time frame, within a day or two. And hearing from you allows us to understand in real time what your concerns are, what you're seeing, and where we really should be leaning in. And so I think the volume that we have heard with respect to misplaced cuts in the executive branch, the firing of critical public servants in the executive branch, actions to cut Medicaid, those messages have come through loudly and clearly and give us the resolve we need to continue to hold the line and fight back. But I would say any issue that you're concerned about, we want to hear from you. And you might be bringing us information that we haven't heard yet about what's happening to you, your family, your community. So that's all valuable to us. In addition to that, we do a great deal of work on constituent services. So we urge you to reach out to our office. You can find our numbers or visit us online if you have an issue with a federal program or need help with a constituent issue, say a veteran issue. Give us a call. We'll try to do everything we can to help. And often, if we're not able to pass a bill on any given day, we are able to assist constituents, and that's a rewarding aspect of this work. So let's take one last question here before we conclude this session. I really appreciate you all joining us. This one's from Ted, who says, when am I going to get an answer on the ACP funding? What is the status of the Affordable Connectivity Program? So Ted, thanks very much for that. Funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program lapsed in the last Congress, and it's a program that I supported passing, and it seeks to help close the digital gap that exists in New Hampshire. Of course, we know we've got a lot of communities that have last miles. We're trying to get the wiring in and the service in to provide people access to high-speed broadband. But we also know that affording that connection sometimes can also be a challenge. And so we've got to make sure that we're addressing both the affordability and the infrastructure issues around broadband, because we know that getting to universal coverage in New Hampshire is really important for people to be able to get on for a health appointment, to shop, to access government services, whatever you're doing online. It's really important. It's important for our small businesses too. So right now, we're pushing legislation that would help restart this program. And I'm hopeful that we will see some positive result here. But I think your question's a reminder that there's been a gap in this program, and that unfortunately there are some people that won't be able to get online. And that's going to be tough for seniors that are trying to get a medical appointment, or maybe a student that's taking college courses. So thanks very much for the question. We support that program. We'll do all we can to try to get it back going. So once again, thanks very much for joining us here. I hope we can do some more of these sessions. We had many more questions than we had time here today for this Facebook Live town hall. It is the honor of my life to be able to represent the people of New Hampshire's 1st District. I thank you for your engagement and feedback. Look, as a nation, we are government of, by, and for the people. And so government is in your hands. I work for you. So we want to continue to hear from you, to engage with you, to try to learn from you. And I look forward to seeing you out and about New Hampshire in the coming days. Wish you all the best. Thanks.